Hey, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Mm. It's good to be back. It feels like it's been like a month.
In 84 years.
Like it's like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
For
So
this
here we
year.
are closing out the end of the year. Welcome, everybody, to Guardians of M365 Governance, episode 12. I'm almost to 1 year of daily Spanish training, and that's the quality of the accent of my Espanol.
So you get into Dallas more, you'll get that Texas accent going with it.
I am looking forward to that. My wife is already doing trips down there, and I come back and I have a little bit of a twang, and my wife's like, "Well,
Yeah.
we don't live there yet."
Cito,
Love
para el
it.
gran tema de governance y el Microsoft 365.
So it is a monthly webcast focused on the rapidly evolving and expanding Microsoft 365 governance story. Our goal is to share insights, best practices, and the latest information about new governance features and capabilities within Microsoft 365. But it's dedicated to everything governance within the Microsoft ecosystem. If you have questions or comments or thoughts on what we should cover or guests we should have on the show, please comment. And is there anything else governance related that's happened out there? Any news? Where it's last week was the ESPC Stockholm.
And it's the thing with governance. All these new tools, features, and functionality are always popping up. But the base, the heart and soul of governance, it's really going to be content, permissions, people, training. It's a culture that has to be in place. It never gets old. We have to modernize, but the heart of it pretty much stays about the same place.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
just understanding where you are as an organization.
I've got a huge event around Copilot and AI experience for Microsoft Munich. I will be traveling to Munich in 2 weeks and talk about governance for Copilot. There's a lot of tension around governance for Copilot. And I'm doing this, the Copilot governance part since our Rancor days. And now I'm still continuing. So I'm just telling the same story under a new employer. The slides have changed, different corporate design, but the story is the same. And with my new role, I'm also enjoying that I'm using and playing with other vendors, tools, and I'm very excited to see how they're making progress. But still, there are some always different.
Yep.
So I'm now very deep into all the other tools, and they are very different. No tool is the same. Every tool has its own strengths and focus.
I recognized this back in the day working for another ISV around migration software. I had a great conversation years ago with Jeremy, who's now at Microsoft, while he was with AvePoint. We were at an event. I think at the time we had just been acquired. I was at Metalogix. So talking about migrations, and you go in there and people want to look at, customers often ask, well, I want to see a side-by-side, feature-by-feature comparison. I said, yeah, the fundamental things that it does, we're accessing the same APIs, but our approach to how we do that and then other features around it are very different. And so it really does depend on your environment. And it's funny because you can have, and I'm talking about migration, but you might have a migration that fails in a certain area and a customer is upset with that product, or they buy another product and be like, this is the one for me. And they have the opposite experience because of the nuances of
No?
what they've built, how they've built that with the features that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Governance is very much the same way.
100%.
Let's jump right into, let's get our guest on stage here, adding to the stage for this 12th
Thank you.
episode. Welcome to Sharon Weaver, who's a Microsoft Regional Director, MVP, MCT, a bunch of other acronyms on there, and the co-founder, the CEO of Smarter Consulting, Sharon Weaver. Welcome, Sharon.
No. Thanks
Wonderful.
for having me.
Sharon, really quick, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your involvement around our topic today, which is getting into the maturity model.
Thanks for having me. I think you nailed it with, I like to collect titles, apparently. I'm Sharon. I'm an overachiever. I've been in tech for, I believe next year I'll be getting paid to be in technology for 30 years. So I've been doing it for a really long time. And before that, it was kind of a hobby. So I've been doing it as long as I can remember. And one of the biggest things, what's real interesting about what ties into this is that I've always been that person that's been really detail oriented. And so it's like, why doesn't this work? Or why doesn't that work? Or how can I make sure the right person has the right access to the right thing? And so I've spent a lot of time in everything from data architecture to permissions to governance and access management. And it kind of just led into this career of really helping people use their tools the right way. Now I actually have been, I don't even know how long, a couple of years, helping the Microsoft Maturity Model team build competencies. We run a monthly webinar like this where we talk about different competencies, different topics, and we also build out the content on Learn. So if you go out on Learn and you search for the maturity model for Microsoft 365, there are tons of tools out there for self-assessment workshops and all the competency information around the maturity model. All of that was built on the lean maturity model. I'm a Six Sigma black belt, and it's really important for me to understand how to be successful and eliminate inefficiencies. And so it's all built with that in mind.
Within the overall maturity model, what's your pitch for why should people be familiar with the maturity model, the Microsoft 365 maturity model specifically?
Just so you guys know, if you ever miss it, it is recorded and it's posted on YouTube with all the other PMP videos. So if you miss it, like just pop out. Sometimes I watch things on 2X and 3X just so I can get the meat of it. I own a consulting services company. People come to us when their hair's on fire. They're like, we're having problems, we need help. And so that's what they come to us for. I think what's important about understanding the maturity model and why it matters is because you want to know, how do I go from here to here? The maturity model is one of the few things that can tell you how to discover where you're at within the model, do a true assessment and identify these are the traits around this particular competency or business or goal and where we're at and kind of like what's happening. And over here are the things that I really want us to be able to do or achieve or get to. And there's a very clear path to go from here. The maturity model helps you identify where you're at and understand where you want to go and how to get there. Often people want to get here, and then they don't understand that there's all these things that have to happen between here and there. So instead of going from here to here, it's like trying to climb Mount Everest. Like, I'm just going to jump to the top of Mount Everest. That's not how that works. You can have a path to go from here to here to here to here to here to here to here in a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable set of actions.
One of my favorite things about, and we should make sure to post the link to the learn.microsoft.com, a collection of pages about this. One of my favorite things that it does is give you keywords for the different levels that are identified. I come from that consulting background. And how do we know where we are? Well, one of the easiest things would be to think, what kind of words and language do you have in place now? Even just looking at those levels, it's like level 100, 200, 300, 400. Look at the words you use, how you speak, how you define your day-to-day activities, and likely you're going to be able to match with your level just with the way you talk about it. And I think that was a really brilliant addition to add those keywords in to help go, okay, where are we? Because you don't know where to go if you can't define where you are.
The other thing to remember, though, that it's not like it's this programmatic, sharply defined around the edges for each of those levels. Most organizations, you might go in and look at, you say, is our goal to ever reach 500? It's like, no, there's no business reason to be there. Like, we want to improve things. We want to automate. We want to be in more control of our environment and be aware of what people are using. And we need to be secure and compliant. You might look at something and say, we're clearly we know we're at 200 level, but there's going to be a lot of things where some of these things we're doing at a 300, some at a 400 level, maybe in a couple areas we're at that 500 level. If you go and look at the competencies, you'll see what I mean. But around communication, you might be really strong in communication, but then failing on other areas, security and compliance and kind of other type of things. But we're really good at sharing information. We hired somebody who built this the right way, and we're very mature in that area. And there's no right or wrong. It helps you better understand why we're not having the level of adoption in these other areas. We tried to skip some steps. It's a great way to be reflective on the industry norms How can we compare ourselves to other organizations of our size in this industry? It provides data points like say, this is generally where you are and what those next steps would be to go and make those improvements. So if you are looking at, especially here we are end of year, talking about next calendar year, like what are going to be our goals? How can we further improve? This will help you get a better picture of some aspirational goals for us to move the organization, our operations to, so that we're getting more out of the technology that we're already paying for.
Yeah. And what are people at those levels doing and businesses at those levels doing? I think throughout my entire career, and I speak to this professionally whenever I mentor anybody, I talk about where do you want to go? What do you want to accomplish? Look for somebody who's doing that. And if you do what they do, you're probably likely going to have what they have, right? And I think it's the same way in the maturity model. If you look in the maturity model and you say to yourself, in my business, these are our business initiatives or these are our goals for next year as a leader. And the maturity model group is quite a bit smaller than some of like the developer groups. A lot of that's because we have a lot of senior leadership, directors, influencers, stakeholders, executive sponsors. Those are the people who are really making change in an organization. And they're like, okay, this is my job. How do I do this effectively? And they're not sure sometimes. And that's okay to say as an executive leader, I don't know what I'm doing. To have a system where you can say, these are the goals that I've been given. These are the initiatives my business is trying to accomplish for the next year. I don't know what to do to get there. I think having like the maturity model to say, these are the goals at this level. What is it that I need to do to get there is really helpful, because otherwise all you're doing is looking at what are other businesses doing at the level I want to be, and then how can I imitate that? But this gives you a clear path to set actionable goals.
And now, Sharon, my question is, which kind of drivers do you see that companies bring from one stage to the other? Is it which kind of compelling events, pains, drivers are bringing them from 100 to 200, 400 to 500, and so on? What do you usually see is most efficient to do this next step?
So we find 100 is just kind of the way of being. Like, I'm just here, right? Everything's on fire.
Yeah.
You're figuring things out as you go. We look at 100 as kind of like we're just starting step. I would say most places at a bare minimum are usually at a 200, right? You've got some kind of loose process. It might not be documented. We find that the most pain kind of falls between the 2 and 300 levels. So 2 to 300 is when people are recognizing we do some things, we're kind of organized, but we want to be better. And so the 2 to 300, I think, is that biggest step where I see people realizing, companies realizing, if we want to go from here to here, we're going to have to make a significant investment. What's really interesting to me is that 2 to 300 is that moment where you know that you have to get there and you know you have to invest. It's the leap of faith to say, I think I can make it. And if you invest correctly and you prepare for it, it's definitely a hurdle you can overcome. But often what I find is that if people don't invest, they don't prepare properly, they slide back to 200 pretty easily. So that 2 to 300 level jump is one of the biggest jumps that people have to make. And then once you get to that 300 level, you are equipped then to choose whether or not you want to go to 400 or 500. When I see the consistency across everybody in terms of going up and down, I would say the biggest consistency is that jump from 2 to 300 is not only difficult and a big investment, but it's very pivotal to most businesses in terms of if you are willing and able to get from 2 to 300 in a competency, you are prepared now to grow to 500 if you want to.
What do you think are some of the steps or the ways an organization can start to prepare their people for these changes? I know from an IT perspective, you roll out a policy that's going to maybe keep people from being able to install whenever they want to on their work computer. We don't like having things taken away, right? So what do you think would be steps and ways companies can prepare their people for the growth and the change?
And by the way, here I'm currently scrolling the website. We should spend 3 minutes and go through the initial definition. What is actually 100, 200, and 300, 400? So maybe that's a good idea just to summarize and see where we are here.
So if you scroll down and look, it tells you level 100, level 200. In fact, anytime you join our calls, we walk through this at the beginning of every single call. One of the things that we found, so Joy, to answer your question while he's kind of popping that up, and then we can go through some of these levels. So Simon Hudson and I did a workshop last year on the maturity model. It was fantastic. And We talked about what their needs were, and we did an affinity diagram where we identified the competencies, areas where they struggle with those competencies. And what was fascinating to us, and we found this over and over and over in other calls and meetings and things like that, is that the number one thing that you can do to be successful in the growth of your different areas is communication. And communication is the biggest possible hurdle there is. So basically, what I'm saying is if you can level up your communication competency, it makes all the other competencies easier to level up. So if you're at a 200 and you go to 300, that's the biggest hurdle of all the competencies to focus on to be successful across the board. We have found that communication is, first of all, the lowest competency at most organizations. So think about communication and change management kind of hand in hand. We find that that's the lowest competency in most organizations, but it has the highest impact in most organizations. So if you really want to say, what's the biggest quick win I can get? Which competency should I focus on first? My recommendation, based on factual evidence, not anecdotal evidence, factual evidence that was really secured by this workshop, is the communication competence.
Clever. This is where we need that applause sound again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I brought it up. I mentioned it first because it's funny because, Sharon and I have our project management show, Project Failure Files, and there's a couple of recurring themes, almost every single episode, communication as being a reason for failed project management. It's there every single time. It's like communication and transparency of sharing the process. When we talk about governance, that's why my background, I've been in tech for over 30 years and started as a project manager. And a lot of that was those two things. Project managers that stand out are those that are really strong in their communication skills and they're planning around that and then make the process very transparent. And that is so much the secret to governance as well.
Human beings don't like change for sure. Unless it's our idea, we don't for change. And we also don't like surprises. If you can tell them, this is what's coming, this is what's going to change, this is what's going to stay the same, because that can be kind of the warm, fuzzy blanket. Hey, this is going to stay the same. Get ready, and this is how we're going to help you prepare. No matter what you're doing, that can be huge, but you got to communicate it first.
And not just communicate, but have a plan around it, right? So a lot of people think we communicate, we tell people what's going on. We
Emails all the time.
help, and I think, this is where the maturity model becomes really important because a lot of people think they're doing the right things.
Yeah.
Everybody has good intentions. Everybody's motivated the right way. Everybody wants to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's more effort. By looking through those competencies, you can be like, okay, we're totally at a 400 or 500, obviously. And you pull it up and you're like, oh, we're not doing any of this stuff. So it really does bring reality to expectation.
The other aspect of this, it could feel very overwhelming. Bring this back up on the page here. But when you look at the number of competencies of the areas, I love that in progress here. It's been there for a while and in progress, but the data and analytics aspect of that. But looking across these, where do I start and across all these different things? Is there a programmatic way to start at the list and then go through all of the different areas? Does it really depend on kind of the goals, the culture of your organization that hey, we know we're having weaknesses in the peoples and communities. We're having adoption issues. We also search is broken. Let's go look at where we are here and have goals there. Or is there a comprehensive approach to looking at all of these?
And where are the dependencies? What I hear from customers is they're overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. And then they don't know the dependencies. So yes, we could start everywhere from A to Z, but where are the dependencies, especially around search and Copilot?
If you click on that main title, there's a dashboard that shows you where to start. So if you go back and click on where it says maturity model for Microsoft 365 on the left, that very top one, there's a dashboard or the overview. Maybe it's the overview. It's the very top one. There you go. So if you look on here on the far right, scroll down just a little bit, tools and samples. So right there on the right-hand side, it says get started. A lot of people have asked us this. This is how to run a Microsoft maturity model workshop. The workshop basically states how to figure out where you're at, what you need to be doing. There are tools and steps to answer exactly what you guys said. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to start. We don't know what those dependencies are. We don't know what we don't know. This literally walks you through step by step how to set your expectations, how to know where you're at. There's tools on here that you can download. There's a worksheet that you can download where you can self-identify where you're at all these places. And that will give you the answers for what you need to focus on, what those dependencies are going to look like, what you're going to need to do to set those goals and to make those changes and to set those action items. This is a big topic behind the scenes that we've talked about, like what to do and how to really know what you need to do to get from here to there.
Yeah, and again, for folks that are, if you go and just do a search for Microsoft 365 maturity model, you'll hit the main site. And again, you can navigate over on the left side to get to the overview for this top level.
This is one of my favorite things to consult on. I've done so many assessments and reports. People come to me and say, we just don't know how to get from here to there. If people come to me and say, what is it that you really, really like to do? I really do love to train and help people get the most out of what they've got, help them understand how to be successful. If there's a consulting service that is my absolute favorite, it is running an assessment and a workshop and helping people set goals to be successful.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I know this is a lot. I've done sessions for years, over the last more than a decade, specifically around maturity model. In fact, so we had one of our former guests, Melinda Morales, and I used to work together. We expanded on the original SharePoint maturity model with Sadie Van Buren. I remember when she was presenting that at SharePoint Saturdays at different events and seeing that kind of kick off and get started. Melinda and I created the SharePoint governance maturity model, the SBGMM. And so we did sessions together. I've got like the video of us presenting on stage in Seattle one year on that topic. It was interesting talking about governance 15 years ago when I left Microsoft and had governance related topics, and there'd be like 2 or 3 people in the room. To see that expand to where go and do a larger conference and there'd be 100+ people, standing room only in a governance session. And it feels like we're kind of moving back into that realm around governance because of Copilot.
Definitely.
And so one thing I know that with the categories at the higher level, you're talking about the competencies that are covered, that it doesn't make sense to maybe have an AI specific category. Is that something people are asking for? Is that another area that the working team may put together, a working group specifically looking at governance for AI?
This year, we covered case studies or real world use cases around the maturity model. And we feel as a team that when you talk about applying it to something like that, it's kind of more vertical. So it covers all the different competencies. And we actually did, I think we've done it twice now. We've covered Copilot and AI using the maturity model. That way, when you go to look, you can say, if I'm going to implement Copilot, what are the competencies that I need to focus on and what are the ones that are important and which one should I be at what levels for? There is a governance competency. We talked about the idea that your governance competency is going to need to be mature. Your communication competency is going to need to be mature. Everything kind of needs to be. But when you think about implementing something like AI, it's your underlying competencies that matter far more than anything else.
Sharon, when I look at your article around governance, I have to apologize because I didn't bring a birthday cake to the party because today it's the 2 years birthday because it was published on the 31st of October, 2022. Would you like to add something in the context of AI in Copilot to this article? Maybe also say with AI, we need to create a level 600 because we cannot squeeze it into 500 anymore. So what would you change?
But is that when is because of AI, that's when governance becomes self-actualized and self-aware? And the governance runs itself. So that's what we aspire to. And then we just truly hands off the steering wheel and it just runs itself.
The funny part is I don't believe that there should be a 600 because at a 500 level, not only are you really aware of your risk tolerance and implementing things the way that you should be, you're also becoming a leader in the space. So a 500 level competency business would be not only knowledgeable about that topic, but they'd also be sharing that information out as a thought leader within the industry, and setting the best practices for other businesses and becoming a business differentiator using that topic. So if I think about what would I change, I think I would make more of a comment around the idea that it is a foundational competency for something like implementing AI well, so that when you put it on there, you are just already ready to rock and roll, as opposed to adding another level to it.
So Sharon, I understand that if you want to invest more time into this article and the evolution of this website, then you're going to invest more in scenarios. So stay with level 500, not going into 600, but spend more focus on the scenarios and the real world use cases.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for the application of the maturity model across the verticals, like across AI, across Power Platform would be another area that where somebody could go in and build a specialty, whether consulting or content, writing about it, sharing experiences of how it matures Power Platform practices from level 100 up to 500. Here's a learning path for that.
Power Platform of Fabric, that's a huge topic. Governance of Fabric. It's
Lots
because
of
what we
opportunities.
see is that there's so many products involved. There is the whole storage layer, data lake layer. Then there is Power BI, which came from governance for Power Platform. So we see new products, which are, yes, there are new products, but they have so many different pieces. And when we glue all the pieces together, we need to talk about governance. Because it's not a single new product. It's just a solution built of many different products. And then it's
Exactly.
obvious that if you need governance.
Well, I know we need to cut it short. People have got meetings to go to. Thank you so much, Sharon, for joining. It's glad you could make it this time. Sure, we'll have you back when the data and analytics section goes live. Maybe we grab you and Simon and we do a deeper dive around the new competency that's out there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
In the meantime, you've got our contact information down below. You can tweet, share, use the hashtag wherever it is that you're doing those things these days. We'll be back in January. We already have our guest aligned. We got to make sure it happens. We won't say any names until it does happen. But we're ready to go with another 12 episodes in 2025. Looking forward to that. And thanks all. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.